Hey guys, this is Kyle at Narrative. We're here with Cat Ekkelboom-White today. How's it going, Cat?
It's going awesome. Thank you very much for asking. How about you?
Not too bad. We've been sitting here talking about plants this whole time, so that's
Yeah,
pretty great. I got no problems with that.
yeah. It's probably a good job that we started recording and actually maybe move the conversation on because I have a feeling that we could have talked about it for hours.
Probably so. We both have like a lot of plants in the background, which I really love. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little introduction about yourself, where you're based out of, and what kind of business that you're running.
Yeah, sure. So, my name is Kat. I am, as my accent might give away, I'm originally from England, but I have lived in Austria, in the Austrian Alps, just outside Innsbruck, for it's over 10 years now. I've kind of stopped counting, but it's been a long time. And I guess what most people kind of know me for is being an elopement photographer. So I work primarily here around where I live, which is the Alps and also the Dolomites. That's kind of my home region. And I do a lot of adventurous elopements. I take couples hiking. I'm also a hiking guide. And in the winter, I used to be a ski instructor, so I also do quite a lot of ski wedding elopement type shoots as well. So that's kind of my main thing. And in the last couple of years, I've also certified as a coach, and I do quite a bit with other photographers and creators in the education space as well.
Cool. That's incredible. Did you move to Austria for photography or for your business, or was it something else?
No, it was a very kind of long-winded thing. I'll try and give you the summary of my life story. Um, I first came to Austria to do a ski season. I worked as a chalet manager, hated the job, but literally I cried at the end of the season because I didn't want to go home. So I then went and trained as a ski and snowboard instructor. I did that in New Zealand. And then I did just winter seasons for a while working as a ski instructor, both in Austria and Australia. I met my husband whilst in Austria, and he was starting to study. He's originally from the Netherlands, which is why I have the most unpronounceable name. And so he was about to start studying his master's in Innsbruck, and I basically tagged along for the ride and never left. And that was way before I was a photographer. I only got into photography after I got married, so I got married in 2014, which just don't tell anyone because it doesn't feel like I'm old enough to be married that long.
We'll say it was
Um,
like 2019. That's cool.
yeah. And I started my photography business, which was pretty much involved buying a camera and then launching a business within about 6 months in
Amazing.
2015. So, yeah.
That's incredible. That's like an amazing story. And it sounds like your business has really overlapped with what you really already enjoyed doing, which was being outside and in the mountains and skiing. And now your business has completely been based around that. Did it start that way when you were first starting to shoot weddings or elopements? Was it more local, small, indoor venue things, or did you go like right out into the mountains?
No, when I first started, it was very traditional weddings, a lot of local couples who usually they have church weddings, or what's very common here is you actually have two weddings because the legal part of the wedding, so what in the US is like the city hall part, the only way you can get legally married here is to go to the city hall. And then most people then have a separate either church wedding if they're religious, or they have what they call like a free wedding, a free ceremony, which is more of like a spiritual celebration of their wedding. And so that's how I started. And it was a lot of bigger weddings, and I was having to speak German all the time, which I found really stressful. And so I thought it was something I really wanted to do, but I didn't really love it. And as kind of just a bit of I don't know what to write about, and I don't want to blog in German because I can't write in German, even though I could speak it. I was like, I'll just like write about my life a little bit. And like slowly, like I got one destination wedding from a couple in the UK who wanted to do a ski wedding. And they were like, oh, we read on your blog that you used to be a ski instructor, and we're looking for a photographer for our ski wedding in Austria. Like, do you want to shoot that? And that kind of opened up that world to me of like, oh, well, what if I only did those kinds of things? So it was a long process to like refine the niche to where I have it now. But it started off with like that first couple was like, oh, maybe there's enough destination weddings that I could only work with destination couples so that I can speak English, because that was one of
Yeah.
the big things. It was like, I don't know if anyone's listening, or for you, if you speak a second language. But I feel like I have a different personality when I'm speaking my second language, especially since I only really learned German living here. And so I felt like I wasn't really being myself. So I was like, okay, brilliant. I can, if I target destination couples, like, how many do I even need? Like, let's say 20, 25 a year. Like, surely 25 people want to get married here a year. Then I made friends with a wedding planner who got me to shoot my first elopement, which I think was maybe in my first full summer, or maybe the second summer of my second wedding season. And I was like, oh, elopements. Like, I'd never heard of one. And this was sort of a similar way to what we think of as elopements now. It was this couple who wanted to get married in the mountains, very untraditionally. They wanted to hike up to this beautiful little chapel, say their vows to each other, and then just explore a little bit. And then we just all went for dinner at the end of the day. And it was just like, oh my God, this is so nice. It's so relaxing. And it
Those
was
are the
literally like,
best.
we drive past a field of sheep. And it was like outside the house of where the farmer was. And the bride was like, oh, do you think the farmer would let me go in? She loved animals. So she was like, do you think I could go in and like meet the sheep? So we literally stopped, we knocked on the door, and we were like, really random question.
Do
Can
you
we meet
mind?
your sheep? And he was like, oh my God, yeah, like let us into the pen with them. And like, it was just, for me, it was just opened my eyes to like, you can just do things differently. And I was like, oh, for my own wedding, it's like, God, I wish I'd known that you could. But that sort of started, to change my thinking. Around that sort of time, maybe a few months later, I started working with a coach who I've worked for now since, well, I still work with that coach. And together we were like, okay, well, what would the ideal scenario be? What would you love to do? Even if it doesn't exist, just tell me, like, if you would create it, what would it be? And it was like, oh, just me going out into the mountains with couples and just them being them, whether they're dressed in wedding clothes or not, and just having fun and just being themselves. And it's kind of just what I created. Yeah.
That's so great. I try to focus on elopements myself. I don't have a super business niche around them necessarily. It's not something that I ever like grew into, but every time a couple reaches out and says, "Hey, we just want you to plan our day and plan our
Yeah.
timeline," it just gives me so much joy compared to, "Hey, we're going to have 250 people in this big room and we got to take photos of all these things on the tables and all this stuff that's supposed to matter."
Yeah.
And that's what kind of my business started. I was 5 years in the Chicago suburbs shooting golf courses and trying to make them not look like golf courses,
Yeah.
and being surrounded by people that really just cared about the stuff. And then I tried to
Mm-hmm.
navigate my line of thinking was, I'd really like to find more clients that care about the people at their day rather than the stuff.
Yeah.
And so occasionally really small little 10-person elopements and intimate weddings come up. I am admittedly pretty anti hike and activity out like that. I love photos like that and I try to take as many as I can, but I'm just not a physical person in that particular way. And so it's not a direction I ever went, but I just love seeing work like yours where you've obviously, these clients found you in such a really specific niche way. And it's so cool that you started a completely different way and said, I'm going to do this my own way. Was your coach a photography coach or like a business coach or a life coach?
No, so she is a business coach slash consultant. Over the years, she's kind of become many things, not always to me, but she I think is also like a trained therapist, although not worked with me
Cool.
in that modality, but mainly a business coach. She came from a marketing background, like when she worked in corporate life before going on her own as a coach, training in that area. And I sort of knew her through wedding circles, mainly from the UK, wedding industry contacts that I had through people who had worked with her before, and I saw like them doing really well. And so I kind of got to know her a bit. And was, yeah, I think this is a person that isn't too in the business, but understands the business a little bit, and will really push me and challenge me, because that's kind of what I needed. And it was really great. It was definitely a game changer for me, for sure.
That's really cool. Yeah, I know a few people who have had other photography coaches or life coaches or business coaches, and it sounds you mentioned that's something that you do too.
Mm.
Um, is your coaching business focused solely around photography as an explicit thing, or do you take on non-photographers for other things in their life?
Yeah, so my real love of in the coaching side. So it's I find it really hard in sort of the education space to know what to label myself. So I have a diploma as a transformational coach, whatever that means.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, what does that mean?
Yeah, like it's really just a way of like taking someone through a journey of whatever that might look like for them.
Cool.
But it is something that it was professionally recognized diploma that I took. Um, but I wanted to acknowledge, so in like pure coaching, it's very much like you leave your own expertise, your own opinions out of it. And I knew that a lot of people that came to me also wanted to hear sometimes my experience on
Yeah.
things. So I kind of call myself a coach, consultant, mentor, sort of slash, 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 all of these different things. And I work with people in very different ways. A lot of my clients are photographers, but a lot of the people who I work with are also multi-passionate entrepreneurs. So they do photography. A lot of them, it's their main thing. But for a lot of them, and for some of them, it's a bit of a journey of embracing that. But it's sort of recognizing that actually they have these other goals, these other passions that they also want to explore, and working out how that they can create this blend between them. Um, I have worked with other creatives as well, so not just photographers. I've worked with yoga and meditation teachers, graphic designers, mural artists before, a musician, but it is mostly people within the wedding industry.
Cool.
Um, yeah, and one of the things that people often come to me for, and what I love working on them with, is all around like building their own unique niches. So just like, I found my niche, and it's always continually evolving. I believe that everybody out there has their own superpowers, their own kind of special sauce that they can put into their business, that sometimes can be things that they think are totally left wing and that they could never be combined with photography. And it's like, well, let's explore that. Like, what if you did? Like, what could that look like? And
Yeah.
and some of those really exciting like conversations and journeys that we go on. So
I
it's
think
really
that's
fun.
really amazing. I meet a lot of photographers who are like that, who, myself personally, I really dove really deep into wedding photography as a space and made it my singular lane of joy and happiness. And over time, I realized I need to diversify my happiness and joy and do other things. And so that was quite a pivot. But I think about, last week I was chatting with Chris and Ruth out of Majorca, and they started a really high end custom handmade hat business over COVID, because
Yeah.
they also already, it's kind of part of their brand. They wear these really beautiful flat bill hats, and they talked about, yeah, we're not just wedding photographers, we're really just business owners and creatives, and we always want to be making or doing something. And so they're really turning down workshops, and they're turning down extra revenue streams coming from the photography space so that they can focus on their business and their home that they're building and constructing,
Yeah.
and their other business, which is now these really beautiful hats. And they're doing it in local boutiques and online. And it's so cool to see someone who's, they're ridiculously amazing, just like yourself, in this one lane already, and then they just go and do it again somewhere. And that's not something that I ever really pivoted in myself. I just kind of stayed in my one little lane. But I think it's really a cool concept to work with someone that says, hey, let me kind of hold your hand a little bit in this, in a different way than like a therapist, because a therapist is going to really have to check their own personality at the door. And it sounds
Yeah.
like people get to really kind of get a little piece of you and your learned experience and incorporate that into whatever they want to accomplish.
Yeah, definitely. And I think the way that I like to kind of blend everything together is often it's even just in the questions that I will ask them. So, if it's just coming to a session with an idea of, how do I make this work? Like today I had a client who came to the session. They were like, I don't know what to do about my next wedding season. Like, I don't feel like I want to book it already, but I also don't want to lose any potentially really great clients. And it was like, well, because sometimes there's these like set ways of like, this is how we do our workflows, this is how we do this, and it's like, well, let's just explore. I was like, can I offer you up some different suggestions? Also, because I've not been in the business like forever, but I've been in the business long enough, and I've tried different things to go like, well, here's some different things. Like, what if you tried this? What if you tried that? And so it's sort of, bringing in a little bit of my experience, also the experience of working with other people and going, I know somebody that actually tried this. How do you think that would work for you?
Yeah.
And just helping people formulate their own aligned ways of doing things. And it's just such a wonderful blended approach, I think.
That's so cool. Obviously everyone you chat with is a really unique perspective. And so you have a different kind of, I don't want to call it like workflow for your own coaching clients and things, but everybody kind of has their own individual things. But there's some baseline things that you maintain throughout, like no matter who you're talking to in a business space, of working through and creating a new brand or a project. Are there things within your own business that you've extended out and said, hey, these are kind of like core staples, we have to stick to these, this is how you need to operate your business or run your world?
Yes and no. I think one of the biggest things with all of the clients that I work with, because a lot of them, when they come to me, they are in this kind of transitional phase of, usually I've got a business that's going really well, but I can't put my foot on it, but it's just not fulfilling me, or it's just not making me happy. And sometimes they have a vision of what they want to create, but they don't know how, or sometimes they've no idea what that new evolved version of their business looks like, and they want me to help them with that.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do with almost every client at some point, although it may come in at different points in the journey, is working on who their ideal clients are. Because all of the other work around it's like, if we don't know what we're building, if we don't know who we're building it for, nothing else is going to work, because that's where as well the coaching moves into more the consulting, and I turn into like, let's create a strategy. If we've no idea who we're talking to, we can't create the strategy for it. So that is one of the things that comes up with most of my clients. And sometimes they will come to me and already have all those things in place. And it could be that throughout the process, because a lot of the people I work with, it tends to be on a longer term basis, from anything from 4 months to I have clients who've been working with me for a few years now, of sometimes just checking back in and going, is that original, say, ideal client, is that original business model or the packages? That's another thing that we look at a lot, the packages that they offer. Is that still what you want to offer? So sometimes just going back and going, hey, we've done so much work. Let's just stop and check. Is this still what we want? Or do we need to adjust? Do we need to move forward in a slightly different way? Take a slight bend in the road to get to where we're going. But
Do you think there are going to be any... Do you think there are going to be any drawbacks to getting too hyper fixated on the concept of an ideal client? I feel like 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, that was a really, really big talking point, and it still kind of is, but it seems a little less in the cards now. But people would get really, really glued to this idea that if it's not this kind of client, I don't even want to book them. I don't want to engage with them.
Yes, but I think the problem is that people don't... I think there's been so much... I don't want to say misinformation or false information, but like a changing idea of what an ideal client is. So I think, like, especially back in the days when everyone ran, like, say, Facebook ads, an ideal client was this age bracket, this gender, had this job, earned this money.
Yeah.
That's not an ideal client. That is
just putting people in the buckets.
That's boxes that you check for when you're trying to do targeting on ads.
Yeah.
For me, an ideal client, or a friend of mine uses a really nice term for this as well, which is an aligned client.
I like that.
And so that the idea of the aligned client or the ideal client is that it's not necessarily about kind of who they are on the small form, but it's about the way they see the world, about their beliefs, their values, and knowing how to speak to them. Because and I have one client especially who I work with who she does multiple different things. So they're an elopement photographer, also a birth photographer, and they were like, well, if I'm niching, it's like they said to me, I feel like my ideal client is very similar. And I was like, well, maybe your ideal client is the same person, but it's different phases of their life.
Yeah.
So their values haven't changed, but the first time you're meeting them is perhaps for their engagement session or their elopement. And then at X number of months, years down the line, they're still those same people, but they then want that service of birth photography, but from your point of view. So I think for me, this idea that an aligned client or ideal client avatar, whatever you want to call it, is not to get too kind of blinkered in the specifics of they look a certain way, they dress a certain way. Sometimes it can be like, oh, they shop at certain stores, but it's like, yeah, but why? What is it about? If they're like, oh, they drive a Tesla, it's like, okay, great. But is it because they're eco-conscious, because they're early adopters? So it's not just what they do, but like why they do certain things. And that's where the magic is almost.
Would you say that overlaps with your being able to focus on super niche clients? So you've got these people who obviously you want them to be similar to you and have a similar worldview as you feel internally, which I've always tried to approach my clients as I want clients who have a heavy love, because I view love and romance in a really particular way. Yeah. And I've just also been jaded from shooting a lot of weddings of clients who, I don't know, maybe they met in high school and they just got married because they're supposed to, and it's not because there's like this really deep compassion or deep passionate love between them. But yeah, I would be interested to hear how that also ties in with your super niche.
For me, 100%, it's like this. It just comes together completely. I do acknowledge that for some people, you can build a truly successful niche that is not necessarily in aligned with you and your values. But if it's a gap in the marketplace that you see that you're like, I know who needs this and I'm going to create it, then, but that's kind of a different way of niching, not how I work. Yeah. Because for me personally, I don't see that as something that's always sustainable, in the way that if you're not aligned and connecting with the clients you work with, how long are you actually going to want to do this for? Yeah. But for me, the super niching comes so much from knowing who those ideal clients are. So for me and my business with the photography side of things, for me, my ideal clients are people who are sustainability conscious, who love spending time with the outdoors. They don't really care about Instagram locations. I've learned a lot. So my ideal clients aren't necessarily super fit people, but they are people who enjoy a little bit of suffering.
That's
and
hiking.
We seem to connect with that. So like they love the fact that when I'm sharing sometimes like behind the scenes of when I'm hiking, like that I'm just like, oh God, this is hard, but look at the views. They're really great. And I've had clients before who've sort of come to me and they're like, this is what we want to do on our wedding day. Like I had one bride who's like, this is what we want to do. I might cry because like I'm really pushing myself out of my comfort zone, but I really want to do it. And I was like, if this is your choice, fabulous. Yeah. She's like, no, because I know how good it will feel when I've done it. So like that for me, those are just like the real like little things of like my aligned clients. And just the way they are, like, yeah, I feel like it's just a different mentality of that. In adventuring, we call it like the people who love their type 2 fun.
Ooh, type 2 fun. Interesting. Yeah, I think that tracks. It's hiking is a little bit of discomfort and pain, and probably why I don't like it. And not just the thing that it I like riding my bike for 60 miles, but I don't like hiking 3 miles. It's just not my jam. As you have built your brand and your business and your website and things like that, how has that taken shape to go, oh, you know what, I'm getting inquiries for people that want ballrooms, or they don't like this, or they think they want this, but then in fact they might not actually. How has that kind of formed what you have now going on?
Yeah, so for me, this whole niching process, it wasn't like a one-time thing of like, right, I'm only going to shoot this kind of wedding.
Yeah.
It was like this ongoing process of constantly like looking at my business and going, right, well, which parts am I enjoying? Which parts am I not enjoying? Like, what shall I get rid of? Which things don't align with me? And I think it was kind of in that space that we all got gifted during the pandemic of space to stop and reflect, and slow the fuck down. That it was one of those times where I was like, okay, well, let's just look at this. Like, what is bringing me joy? Is there things that aren't bringing me joy? Um, and so I started removing things. I started changing things. So big changes for me were things like I stopped shooting destinations. And it wasn't because I didn't enjoy the travel so much, because I do enjoy it, but I was so concerned about the sustainability aspect of it. For me, I just couldn't justify from my own values of flying somewhere where I wasn't really an expert, where I'd done some like a bit of like Google research and looked on satellite photos and things.
Yeah, Google Earthing around to see like, is this place look good?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But then, you know, I'd get there and the weather was throwing a curveball, and it was like, like it made me really also realize not only had I flown all the way out there, but I really wasn't an expert that the couples could that they could have had if they'd have gone with a
Yeah.
local. And I compared that to the service that the couples that I worked with got when I shot at home. Because when I work with couples here at home, like this is my backyard. I'm pointing out the window, which you obviously can't see, but it's mountains. And it's like literally I can change plans at the drop of a hat and know that I can go north, south, east, west, and whatever we do will be fine. I can give them multiple options. I can give them pros and cons of each one. So not just saying, okay, this is my plan B. I can be like, here's plan A, B, C. If we do this one, there's great thing about this, but this is the downside. You know, so really explaining the different intricacies of
It's
it.
really honoring your client too, because you're giving them the best experience possible, and knowing I've got weddings I say no to for a
Yeah,
variety of reasons, and a lot of those are just, hey, I'm not good at that.
yeah.
There's another photographer who's so much better at that, and it's a wedding day. You deserve to have the best vendor or photographer that you can.
Exactly that. Like I really, it was almost like putting my ego aside a little bit and saying, I'm not necessarily the best person. And I've always said I will only work in Europe because from like a legal standpoint, like I'm not, I don't want to go through the whole work permit process of applying to work in other countries. I'm never going to do it on a travel visa. Like I just don't, for me, from an integrity point of view, I don't agree
Yeah.
with that. But from my own personal values, it's like, no, there's people there who are awesome at what they do. They're maybe just really bad at SEO or Instagram, so no one knows them,
Yeah.
but like they're there. So yeah, I just saw that also for me at home. I just block off the entire week for a couple for an elopement. So as well, like
Cool.
if I'm flying for a destination, it's like, well, maybe we can push it back one day. It's like for my couples now, it's like you literally have the whole week. So if let's aim to plan for a Wednesday, but if we need to do it on the Monday or the Friday, if you're there that long, which I recommend to them, it's like, then I'll just be available to you so that we can adjust to the weather. And so that was kind of like me refining my business. And then I kind of went, I'm only going to shoot elopements. And then I realized like I hated the shorter days. Yes, it was sometimes nice to go home earlier, but I always found like the couples wanted to do so much more in the time that they had. And it was like, no, like you've only booked a half day. Like we can't do all these things. And then they would try to, and it would feel rushed. And I was like, do you know what? If I keep offering this, people will keep booking it. So I was like, I'm
Yeah,
going to,
spending a day and a half with a
yeah,
couple when it's just the two of them can be so
yeah,
cool, because you're sharing this adventure together. I get something out of it. I get something out of spending a day and a half with two people and
yeah,
running around wherever we're doing things. Like, it doesn't need to be this 4 hour strict collection contracted timeline, because somebody's missing out on something.
exactly. And it's like those just small moments. It's like, look, if I just, like, I was just like, it's just a day, then there's no pressure. It's like, I'll show up when you want me to show up. If you want me to come take pictures of you getting ready, which I love and I think you should have, but if you don't want it, you don't have to, but you don't have to worry about the hours. Like, I'm literally there for you from when you want
Yeah.
me to show up to when you're like, all right, we've really had enough now. You can go home. Like, I'm there for that time for you, and you don't have to make it all meaningful. You don't have to make it photogenic. You can just do what you want, and I will capture it, and I will obviously I help them with the locations because I know the areas. I'm like, let's go here. Like you've said, you love this kind of thing. So if we go here, there's a really lovely mountain hut. We could stop at for lunch. We could wander around here. There's a beautiful lake, so it's just like, but time is never the stress issue then.
Yeah.
And so that was one of those things is like, right, I'm only offering the full days. I also stopped doing like the engagement shoots, the pre-weddings, the honeymoon shoots, because they wanted to book, like, I don't know what your elopement clients are like, but sometimes I would get inquiries for pre-weddings just as far in advance or sometimes longer than an elopement, because I've had them sometimes within like 3 weeks, and they're like, we want to elope in 3 weeks time. And it's like, I've got a pre-wedding or an engagement shoot for like, those usually it's hard to get them to put more than 4 hours. My
issue with engagement sessions in the past was I had collections for years that just included them. They were just there.
Yeah.
And so I started to get clients that were showing up to do the engagement session because it was included, but not because they wanted to.
Yeah.
And I don't know, my time is valuable, and spending 90 minutes or 2 hours with a couple who barely wants to be there sucks. Like, I don't want to be there. Now I don't want to edit these photos. Now I'm going to like phone it in as I like get through this gallery and send it off. And so I changed that to say, if you want to put the money forward to do an engagement session, it probably means it's important to you for either that period in your life or the story leading up to it, or you just want to spend time together or engage with me. And those sessions are so much more impactful than just, it's just cause we're supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, like, because my clients are all destination clients, like I don't have the same couple for an engagement shoot as I would.
Yeah, that would be really hard.
And so it's like, well, we can do multiple days for the wedding, but the engagement shoots, the proposals, all of that. I was like, yeah, they're cute, but they take so much planning, but they pay a fraction of the cost.
Yeah.
Or the fraction of the price. And I was like, do you know what? I don't enjoy them as much. So I just, took all of those out. I was like, I only do elopements. I only work in like basically a 3-hour radius of where I live. And basically like my focus is really now, since I've also become a certified hiking guide, was like, except for the winter when it's skiing, the rest of the year it's really focusing on the people who actually just want to go out, suffer a bit, go hiking. It doesn't even have to be difficult hiking, but just spend the day exploring, getting a bit dirty. And so if I get any inquiries that don't kind of fit within that, if I can't read it and go, oh hell yeah, they sound awesome, then I'm just like, no, but that's something that you touched on before. Then I will send them, if they've done and taken the time to fill in my inquiry form to tell me about what they want, then I know exactly who I can refer them to, who will be the perfect person for them.
I think referring is such a big, like, when we had this ideal client big focus thing like 5 years ago, I think there was a handful of photographers who would look up a client, they'd look them up online, and they'd see a visual representation of them, and they would reject them for one superficial reason or another. And that's not good ethics or integrity. But the idea of saying, hey, I can't shoot your wedding, but here's 3 or 4 more people. Like, you took the time to find me, connect with my work. I can take the 2 minutes to say, at least let me try to make the next step of your process a little easier and give you 3 or 4 people you don't know about who are also available on your day.
That's exactly the way I've taken to it, is often if they spend the time to, tell me about their day, then I will take that. And as if they are quite specific in what they're looking for, then I know different people. And again, I will always recommend other local vendors. Because, if they've come to me, then they want someone who knows the areas. Or occasionally I still get inquiries for places that I used to shoot in, like Norway, Faroe Islands. And it used to be that I would offer them out to kind of my network. And now it's like, do you know what? No, I'm just going to send them the name of like the 1 or 2 friends that I have. that are in those areas that are the experts. And it's like, do you know what? Or sometimes it even is just, they're wanting a bigger wedding, but they're like, oh, we'd love to just go for a few ski runs in between. I'm like, well, my social
Yeah,
anxiety, I
that's
do,
not what Cat. Yeah, that's
but
not what Cat offers.
yeah. And it's like, sounds amazing. And here's someone who does exactly what you've just described. You're going to be best with them. And for me, it aligns with me, because it means that they're going to have somebody who's hell yes to working with them, who's just as excited about working with them as they are about their wedding. Because that's one of the things that I think so many people struggle with with niching. It's like, oh, but I don't want to turn down clients. It's like, but if you're not hell yes to working with them, if you're not super excited, that's so unfair to them to have someone who's just a photographer who's just
Yeah.
settling for them because it pays the bills.
Yeah, I mean, you can go both ways. I've been
Yeah,
the wedding photographer on a wedding where I go, man, I feel like a vendor today. I don't feel like
yeah,
these clients give a crap about me. Not that they need to, but I like to have some kind of relationship or rapport with them. And if I just feel like somebody who came in to fix the sink like a plumber, like this doesn't make me feel good. I don't go home at night and like lay in bed and go, what a great day. Like, and I want my days to be important and special too. So turning down work is, when I first started, I think the goal was to book everything that came in. I think I was booking 99% of weddings that came in from my local market in the Midwest. And then that power of saying no over and over and over again was so amazing, and like paid off when you actually shoot the work and the content that you're excited about.
yeah, yeah.
So
And
cool.
it's as well that when you say no, it means that, well, firstly, you're doing them a service by letting them go to someone who is like so excited to work with them.
Yeah.
But it also means that it gives you the space, the energy to then be able to say yes to that better thing that is more aligned, that is then coming along. Because I'm pretty sure we've all been there, like, especially like around COVID when it was coming to an end, where there was that, oh, they're not really an aligned client, but should I say yes? Because, who knows what the hell is coming in the future
Yep.
kind of thing, when everyone was like, oh my God, life is now so uncertain. I can't trust anything. Certainly I did that, of going,
Yeah.
should I take it? Because
I call
what
them
there's
desperation bookings.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What
And
if there's
everyone,
another pandemic or,
yep.
and,
And I've
and then,
fallen into it.
yeah.
Yep.
And then as soon as you do it, there's that kind of gut feeling of like, this doesn't feel good. And then this has happened to me before, where
The
then,
perfect inquiry comes in for the same
exactly.
day.
And they can't change their date, and it's like, oh no, why did I say yes?
I've had so many of those, and it breaks my heart every time. And I always look at it like, okay, how did this happen? Oh, it happened because it was December, and despite the fact that every year you book all the weddings you need, you still stand in the shower and freak out for 3 months every winter and wonder if somebody's going to find you on Instagram. And then I booked that thing because, well, they loved me. We talked for 14
Yeah.
minutes. And they want to sign a collection today, and it's money in the bank. And then, of
Mhm.
course, it's like the next day. It's always the next day. They're like, "Hey,
Yeah.
do you want to come to the south of France and drive around with us for a week?" Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's always that one. And I always feel kind of really bad. So this is something that I like spoke about a little bit recently. But it's that thing of like, it's not when I say like, oh, I wish I hadn't taken it. It's not often because they're not wonderful people. It's just because they weren't aligned with me and the
Yeah,
way I like to
exactly.
work and the way I work best. So it was just that it wasn't in either of our best interests to work together.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah, I
just
don't
that
think
we
I've ever
both
booked
meant.
anybody not in a long time at least, but I don't think I've booked anybody since like I became more cognizant of who I'm booking that I really hate, that I'm like, ugh, these guys are the worst. It's just, oh, they're great people, but maybe they're not the same people I would want to spend time with in my normal real life, because
Mhm.
they check another couple of boxes that I'm not really that into or connect with or align with my own personal ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
a tough space, but saying no is so huge for yourself.
saying no, it's so hard. And it definitely for me is taken so much practice. And that's where as well having my coach has really helped, because like the number of times that we've checked in and it's, how are things going, how are things looking, and it's like, and it's like there's a lot of work to do around dealing with that fear of like, if I say no, then is there just going to be this void there of me doing no work? And it's like actually getting into that mindset. No, there will always be more stuff coming. Like there always has been, there always will be. And learning from those times when I did say yes and I shouldn't have done. And going, okay, well, if I haven't learned that lesson enough times now, then, I would be foolish to not change the way I do stuff and
Yeah.
start to say no.
Something just happened to me a couple of months ago, and I can't remember if it was a therapist quote or something I read online. And it was like, how many lessons has life been trying to teach you and keep repeating? And it was something that had happened like 12 or 13 times at this point. And I went, okay, this has
Yeah.
been happening to me since I'm like 17 years old. It's now a dozen duplicate experiences. Clearly, I am not getting the signals.
Yeah.
Let's call my therapist and start talking about this.
Isn't it like that classic quote of like insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and
Mm-hmm.
expecting a different result or
Yep.
whatever? It's exactly that.
Yeah.
But I think it's also acknowledging that there is fear and discomfort in that, in saying no. But the more that you start to do it, the more empowering it feels, and the more you realize that you can say no and that you do have a choice. And when you then start to see the changes of like, oh, I said no, and then something great came along, sometimes not instantly, but it will, and it does. Like you just like, it makes you realize I am on the right course.
Yeah. This
But
business has given me a pretty good
uncomfortable.
yeah, this business has given me a good timeline measurement. Like, you can do anything for a year. That's something somebody told me a really long time ago, and it was completely disregarding or unrelated to wedding photography. But if I make business changes this season, I won't really feel the rewards or effects of those for 8 to 10 or 12 months or something. And I try to think that in most of my life too. If I go, all right, I'm going to start to try to pivot my mindset or try to move the ball forward in some form of adult development, I'm not really going to feel those effects for 8 to 10 or 12 months. That's just kind of how life works. And I think that really happens at weddings too. So people are really hard to say no because they want to pay rent that month. But if you can just hold on to those couple of things you want to fine tune, and in a year those will pay off. Are there things that you find yourself fine tuning and tweaking along the way, or are you pretty in a spot where you're like, everything's great, I'm good?
No, I am constantly evaluating, changing, tweaking things. Like especially for me, like I did big changes going into this year, but then even as I start to think about next year, thinking about how I want to change things even more, like some of the things that are really kind of present in my mind at the moment are around sustainability within our industry as a
Yeah.
whole, and working in an area like the Dolomites, which is now becoming like the hottest destination
Yeah.
for photographers, and seeing the overcrowding that's happening there. Also kind of me thinking, okay, well, this is my home and this is like my main area where I work, but also like this, like it's kind of a very difficult thing of like, I want to promote myself for it because that's my area, this is my home, but at the same time actually kind of thinking, do I need to step back from this because I don't want to be another person contributing to the
Yeah.
fact that these places are getting absolutely destroyed. So
Yeah, that
it's
I living in Seattle for a couple of years, it was a destination hotspot. So many photographers from other places would come in because their clients say, "Hey, we want to do a destination wedding, get married in Washington," and then photographers would reach out to myself or my friends and say, "Hey, we're trying to do XYZ. How do you get to this place?" Very similar to you. You're like, "Hey, I don't want to go to this other place. I'm not the expert there. Someone there should take care of
yeah,
that." And I know
yeah,
like Iceland is still to this day like just overrun with a million people, myself included. I've been a few times,
yeah,
and it's the spot. And I see that in a bunch of stuff, not even just within our industry, just even in my local city. I go, oh man, Instagram or social media has made every place try to look like every place, and everybody knows where everything is, and they're all trying to go there and make it the poppin' spot. And it's hard to I can imagine it would be really hard to balance that in your own home place where you're at. What do you think you're going to plan to do on that? Are you going to just cut ties and say, you know what, I'm not going to advertise that anymore. I'm going to let it organically come in, or?
No, I mean, I'm really kind of just pivoting, or not pivoting, but really highlighting even more now, to be a lot more vocal about why sustainability matters, why working with locals matter. Also, just because, for example, in the last week and a half, and this isn't the first time this has happened to me, this is just the most recent. I had messages on Instagram from a bride panicking because they have an elopement in a week in the Dolomites, or I think actually now this coming weekend. And the location the photographer chose is covered in snow. It's inaccessible. They're really worried about it. And can I help them with their backups? And I kind of just responded and said, hey, look, if you've got a local photographer, they've got your back. They'll know that this time of year is really, really tricky, that loads of locations don't become accessible until kind of into June. But if you've got a local, you'll be absolutely fine. And they said, no, we've got a photographer from Arizona.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, well, yeah. Like, and it just puts me in a really difficult spot. And this isn't a friend of mine who also is a local photographer in this area had a similar thing where someone reached out to her, where they turned up at a really well-known spot they planned a whole shoot around these boats and everything in one of these lakes, and it was closed. And it was like, well, yeah, we all know that it doesn't open this early in the season, but they had an out-of-town photographer. And it's just like, we see this shit happening over and over again. And it's like, how can we continue to work in these places while making more people aware that, like, okay, if you're going to fly in another photographer from a different continent, make sure. So I've also had issues with other photographers kind of laughing it off, telling me, oh, do you know what? I was in that location with couples last year when it had snowed heavily and it felt really, really dangerous. And I was like, yes, that location.
You probably should have been there.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's like, you know, as much as I think you're wonderful photographers, you're not experienced mountain people. And just because locations are so easily accessible doesn't mean that you don't need any knowledge of the outdoors to be there. Yeah. And so I just keep seeing like so many alarm bells, and I'm like, I don't want to stop shooting there because this is my home. And it's like, well, I'm trying to bring more people into the north area where I live a bit more, where it's quieter. But then also just being the unpopular one that says, hey, look, overcrowding is a problem. Over tourism is a problem. If you're working here, please work with locals, because we know these areas. We will be able to help you if shit goes wrong. Like if your makeup artist, gets in a car crash on the morning of your wedding, we're local. Yeah. We've probably worked with 5 other makeup artists in the area.
And be able to keep you safe. Be able to keep you like safe and not in hazardous conditions.
Exactly. Like, so for me personally, like I'm a trained hiking guide. A lot of the other people I work with, they maybe aren't like certified outdoor professionals, but they have grown up in these places, so they know how to drive your car in winter conditions, how to put snow chains on, where to go, where not to go at certain times of year. And it's about keeping people safe so that they can actually have this fun experience.
Well, awesome. Obviously, you talk about a lot of this with your one-on-one clients. Is this something that you also speak about on your blog or Instagram or podcast or anything like that? Like where are you trying to start to spread this conversation?
I'm trying to have the conversation, I think, really with as many people in as many places as possible. Especially around the terms of how to be more sustainable, because I don't feel like it's a sexy topic that many people want to talk about.
Yeah.
Because it involves sometimes a bit of a look in the mirror. But also, how to really build and run your business with integrity, like, being an ethical business person. And so, I certainly am being a lot more vocal about this on my podcast. I've started to also create some content on my education blog around it, like, so with actually actionable steps of, not just talking about, hey, like, here's what sustainability is, how can we be more sustainable, but like, okay, if you want to be more sustainable in this area, here's some ways you can do it. And so actually trying to give people some resources if it's things that they actually want to do more. And the same with the niching thing. Like, I just started interviewing amazing people doing different really cool things within niches in photography, and just sharing these stories as well. So mainly on the podcast, but yeah, just all over. You know how it
Cool.
is. You do a podcast, share it on socials, write a blog post.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I'm
everywhere.
going to grab all those and put them in the description for this video. I want to give resources that people can go learn and hear
Yeah.
more about this. I really haven't chatted with anyone else in this series or really in my own professional career that is so entrenched in these really specific topics that we're talking about today.
Hmm.
So I want to be able to share that more. But thanks so much for taking the time to chat today. And I'm really looking forward to the next time we could talk more on stuff like this.
Yeah, thank you. I've really, really loved it. And I feel like now we need to also swap like plant care tips on Instagram and stuff as well.
Oh, yeah. My plant care tip is download the app Planta and let it tell you how to do everything because I do not have the brain to remember anything else for plant care.
See, mine is self-watering pots.
Oh, I've been wanting to try that, but I was afraid of getting root rot or something. So I'll have to dive into that.
No, they're great. They're great for that not having the anxiety. So
Our next podcast will be about plant care.
yes, yeah, sustainable plant care.
Perfect.